Welcome everyone to the Layer5 community meeting. Today is 13th of August, and we have a couple of new folks join the community this week. And so here we have a tradition where newcomers gets to introduce to the community and gets to know what all projects are happening in Layer5, and the community also can get introduced to newcomers. So Barun, would you like to start off by introducing yourself?
Hello. Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Hello, everyone. I am Barun Jebnath. I am from India. I am pursuing BTech in electronics, and from the last 2 to 3 months, I am just exploring the web development field. Today, my first PR merge, so I am happy about that. Yeah, that's me.
Awesome. Thank you, Barun, and welcome to the Layer5 community.
Yeah, thank you.
Nice. So it's not a Friday the 13th like a bad thing then. It's like a good thing in this case. Nice. So Varun, is that your first open source PR, or is that your first
yes.
PR?
Yeah. Yes, that's my first PR to an open source organization.
Yeah. All right. You popped your cherry. We got good.
Yeah, thank you. I must say that the community here is very helpful. Like I got so much help from the maintenance of the project. Yeah, thank you.
That's
for
awesome.
help. Yeah.
That's great to hear, and congratulations on your first open source PR. Hasna, did you get a chance to introduce on this call?
Yeah, sure. Hello, everyone. I am Hasna from Dhaka, Bangladesh. And I have recently graduated, completed my bachelor's as a CSE student. And I have been into open source for quite a year now. And last winter, I was an outreach participant for the project of Mozilla. And I'm looking forward to contribute to this community as well. Yeah.
Yep. Thank you, Hasna. That sounds really good.
Thank you.
Next up, we have Viresh. I think Viresh, you just joined the community. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Viresh, studying a third year of CSE from Bangalore. I'm more of a front-end guy. Recently been learning the DevOps and stuff. Yeah, that's it about me.
Great of you to join here. We actually have a couple of call for actions in the Meshery front end. Meshery is one of the projects in the Layer5 community. So we will be talking about this on today's call. So yeah, you came in at the right time. All right. Anyone else new on the call that we missed? If you are new here, if you have mic problems, then you can just type it in chat. All right, let's get started with the agendas for today. So as we have mentioned in previous meetings, Meshery and Service Mesh Performance, which are Layer5 community projects, are now CNCF adopted by CNCF. So we have a community group in community.cncf.io. So here we will share all the events that is happening around the community, and you can watch the recordings and all those other stuff. So if you haven't joined the community yet, you can join right now. The links in the chat. And we also have an upcoming webinar with CNCF on Meshery. So this will be on August 19th, and this will be hosted on YouTube. So this is a on-demand webinar, so you can basically watch it anytime you want. So you can RSVP it in this link. And we also have planned a session with CNCF student groups. So the CNCF students is a new group within the CNCF with an aim to basically elevate student contributors in the CNCF community projects. So we are planning a session with the CNCF projects, and some of the maintainers and mesh mates at the Layer5 community will be joining the session. And if you want to start, like, this would be a good place to learn how you can start contributing to CNCF projects and projects in the Layer5 community. So the event was supposed to be conducted this week, but it is postponed to next week to make sure that we have a great session for the students out there. All right. Yeah.
I'll add a little bit of flavor to that if I could, and that's to say, if it isn't evident by some of the neighbors, some of your neighbors, some of the other folks that are on the call, people that are on the call, that students are most welcome here as well. Like, as a matter of fact, I think if you tallied up the majority, there's a lot of students here, and whether you're formerly learning in a university or you're graduated university and you're still learning, there's a ton of learning that goes on here. We're dealing with new tech. Service meshes are not ubiquitously adopted yet. There's tons of things to learn. They're very powerful. While you're trying to learn and wrangle those things, there's Docker and Kubernetes and Prometheus and Grafana and Jaeger and and cloud events and blah, 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 blah. There's like a ton of technology being used within the projects here. It's in part because the core project that we focus on, or the largest project that we tend to focus on, is Meshery. Meshery, it has a number of satellite projects, if you will. Those satellite projects get talked about on the newcomers call on Thursdays to introduce everyone to them, because they use different languages, and different folks are interested in different aspects of the projects. So if you're not familiar with them all, like, go to the newcomers call, you'll get introduced. It's good. There's one that's coming up that will be in C++, and a number of you are interested there, so that's good. I interjected to say that everybody here is learning, including myself. And so what we're going to have a couple of sessions as the CNCF has recently formed. The CNCF hasn't formed this. This is more just, there's a band of CNCF ambassadors, or just nerds who are recognized as being nerdy toward CNCF projects, that created a Twitter handle that then also created, I don't know what you call it, I guess a stream on Twitch that's part of the CNCF stream. So it's really just like a loosely managed channel there and Twitter handle, but it speaks to students broadly. And many of you are students, many of you have things to tell maybe other students who would come and contribute. And that's mostly what we're trying to do with this upcoming session. So there's a number of you who've been here for a while. It would be really nice to have each of you give a quick tip to those that might follow in your footsteps and contribute to the projects that we steward here or other projects. That's the goal of that session. We thought we might have And so, by the way, if you have suggestions or things that like would be a better tip or a better trick, like please drop it in. If you enjoy sharing with others, it might be that it's your time to share a tip. We thought we would have probably a couple of other sessions, assuming that this goes well. Those other sessions might be introducing people to Meshery as a project, and going through Meshery a bit more deeply, and not just sort of generically about how to get involved in a CNCF project. That's what this session is about. The next one might be about Meshery. The one after that maybe might be about introducing people to service meshes in general as a concept. We give and have given lots of workshops on how to get started with a service mesh. So maybe we would do that. I kind of an open-ended, there's a few proposed sessions, and maybe how far we go with some of this might depend upon how involved some of you get with it. So just some extra comments there.
Thank you, Lee. So I have shared the links to all the sessions and all the details in the chat, so you can take a look at it there. So we have a couple of help needed areas in Meshery. So one of this is to work on the Meshery workflows in Meshery. So basically the issue is that our workflows run unnecessarily when people make PR. So even if they haven't changed the doc, the workflow to check if the doc site is properly being built is running. So it wastes a lot of resources. So this is one area that you can explore if you are interested in DevOps centric or CI/CD stuff. So the link to the issue is in the chat, and so yeah, this is an area that we need help. And another area that we need help is the Meshery docs. So we have a lot of open issues specific to Meshery's documentation. And Lee, would you like to talk a bit more about this?
Sure. Yeah, I'm not sure if we have any like super special call outs on which areas are more needed than others, but there's something to be said about documentation and about things like unit tests or things like fixing a bug. I think those get a negative stigma that is actually undeserved. You can be a super bright software back-end software engineer writing the craziest functionality and all condensed into 2 lines of code that no one will ever understand because it was so dense. And that's actually the point. That's actually the problem, is if you don't go, if your fingertips are too sensitive to go type out some documentation as to what that does, well, ain't nobody gonna use it. And then it doesn't matter at all. It doesn't matter. People don't use it, it doesn't matter. So anyway, the point is, there's a lot that you all have done on this project and the other ones as well. And there's a ton of docs that are missing in here. What a great way to learn the tech is by documenting some stuff. And so if you're thinking like, hey, I might try my hand at that and go, document some things, great, there's issues for that. But also there's just go use the project, and if you find a bug, go file a bug. If you find that the documentation didn't really explain that area, go update the doc, or go like the screenshot is old, like go take a new screenshot. Or there's just totally a page that's entirely missing. There's a few pages that are entirely missing. There's some things that all of you can, well, make a name for yourself by, like there's a whole another thing that we do in the community about having folks that want to write blog posts. There's a place to publish those. A blog post on tips and tricks on how to use Meshery CTL. I mean, the blog post can be very short, be very long. it can be a video if you don't want to write a post. It can be, so those are all very much needed. It's, I'll talk to some very, well-seasoned engineers who will come over and look at the project and go, okay, well, so where do I start? Or like, what am I supposed to do? I'm running it now, but then I'm like, what's next? And it's kind of surprising how often that sentiment is conveyed. And it's important, and so docs are important, I guess is what I'm saying. There's a couple of projects that have been recently completed. Like there have been new GitHub actions, custom GitHub actions created here in the community. A couple of folks have worked on those, notably Rudraksh, who's on the phone. One of them has recently been documented, but the other one is not written up. And it's fairly straightforward. These are not difficult things to understand. They have a little bit of docs in their README, but nothing in the main Meshery docs. So all kinds of easy ways to get into the project to learn this stuff as you go. And as you go and you're learning it, like write it down, like write it into the docs. So cool. I mean, yeah, that's that. I think while we're on, I think this is kind of a general call for a couple of areas that are in need of assistance. And so Meshery's UI, if you're into Figma, if you're into UX or into visual design, either one, there's always need for assistance. And it's not just Meshery's UI. There are 6 different sites that the community has that always need some help. There's one other item that I would call out that isn't always obvious to people. I was just talking to Neha about a meeting that goes on once every 2 weeks. It's the Meshery continuous integration meeting. We sometimes talk about DevOps-centric things there as well. The biggest open need in terms of artifacts, in terms of CI for Meshery is, well, the fact that the Meshery container image is like 1.76 gigabytes. It's healthy is the most polite way of saying it. It's pretty thick, a little overweight, obese. It's morbidly obese. It's a turnoff to people who want to use the project. They have to wait for the thing to download. And while waiting for the main adapter, the main container image to download, they're also looking at the other Meshery adapter containers download. And they start to get impatient. And so slimming down that container image is an open item that's in need of help. So, cool, that's all I have. I'll put a link to the other meeting, the CI meeting, in case people are interested. You can also see the community calendar if I do.
Thanks, Lee. So Suhani also has another call for action. Suhani, would you like to talk about the service mesh labs?
Sure, Navindu. Okay, so this is about interactive service mesh labs, and it has guided scenarios where we can learn how we can use Meshery. And now we are looking for volunteers who can help us in improving the existing labs and also help us in creating the new labs. And we have few volunteers who have already signed up, and their names are, sorry if I misspell your name. It's Surya Shankar Das, Vijay, Aditya Chatterjee, Sentin the boss. So I want to know, so which of the scenarios you want to pick? You want to improve the existing labs or create new labs, which is mentioned here?
I'd prefer like starting out with improving the existing labs, I guess.
Okay, great. So I didn't get your name. Sorry.
I'm Surya Shankar.
Okay. Okay. So let's assign you as Stu. Okay. And we also need some names to help us in creating the new labs.
So
Me? I'll take one if that's
Thank
okay.
you, Lee.
Yeah, well, since no one else raised their hand, maybe I get to pick if that's.
I would also like to enroll.
Hey.
My name is Anshuman.
Great.
Yes.
if anybody else like to volunteer, like you can add your names to the meeting minutes. It's filling fast, so be quick. This might be an easy one. The one I'm highlighting just because I just wrote a entire documentation for this, so you might well as copy this. So that's like, please jump in and take it up. Thank you, Suhani, for that. Thank you for leading this up. Anita, would you like to talk about the community handbook next?
Yeah, sure. Hello everyone. Let me try to share my screen. My screen is visible.
Yes.
So if you look at these links here, you can just click on any one of them. So far we've put together the handbook on the site. This is not like we're working on this. I've created an issue for this particular part because this is not what it's supposed to look like. This is, hold on. Well, that's one. It's taking longer to load, but yeah, my point exactly why I brought this up is the handbook right now, the one on the website, it's confusing even to persons in the community who would want to read it. And that is not what we want to achieve. We want a handbook that if anyone comes up and goes through it, they can able to understand the community without needing an extra guide. And so far, this document outlines everything that we need. We have so many people contributing, like there's so many persons right now, Goodness, Daniel, Ruth, myself, Krishna, right? I think I got the name right. Yes, so many other persons are working on this handbook right now, but we need more hands because if we need it to come out faster, we need more hands to help with the documentation, especially because that's the major aspect. We've compared to the previous one, it was so disorganized and we put together everything in this table of contents, but it still needs like to be moved from the previous doc to this one. So everything is organized according to this table of content. So we don't have to have the challenge of doing that manually on the website. We just move everything from this doc directly to the website. And yeah, I'm just calling for more contributors to help us. We have someone who has taken on the about page. Another person is working on the community heading. Another is working on the project. Another person is taking on the repository overview, the learn layer 5. So all those are assigned. But yeah, we could still need more hands working on this. And also the UI, we still need a lot of ideas on the best way to put together the UI because there's no fixed design for it. So we just, it's not a very complex design actually. We just need more hands, persons who are very who have a good idea of design maybe on the front end, and also persons who have an idea of documentation, and you don't have to be an expert at it actually. So just the idea is enough. How you would best read a document to help you is the way we want this to look like. So if you think the current state right now is good enough for you as a contributor already, then you should picture it how someone who's coming to the community for the first time would feel reading the document. And for me, I don't think it's good enough. So we could use more hands and the suggestions and best ways to improve this. Yeah. So that's just about the handbook right now. We just need more volunteers to help us out here.
Thank you, Anita. There is a couple of feedback in the comments. One was to indicate the languages in the repository overview page to indicate the core language or the core tech stack of each of the projects. So that's one area.
All right. When was that?
Yep. Anita, go ahead.
Yeah, we're working towards that. Currently, I was actually looking at the repository and the project overview before now, and I actually wanted to include that because I noticed on the website it doesn't have the languages indicated, which is actually poor experience for somebody who would want to like hop on any of our projects. So that will be included as well. We still need more suggestions. You can drop your suggestions in the Slack channel to any of the meshmates. Actually, you can reach out to me or any of the meshmates and would implement it. So that's just about that.
Sounds good. So reach out to Anita if you have any ideas and suggestions. Before we move on, would anyone else has any comments right now? All right. Thank you, Anita. Neha, would you like to talk about installation of Prometheus and Grafana from Helm charts?
So actually, there is the issue which opened for Prometheus and Grafana. So I would like to let Samir start first because he has opened that issue. So he'll give the context what we want to do, and then actually we wanted to understand from the code as well, because we wanted to move from the Istio add-on. So Samir, would you like to go ahead?
Hi. Yes. So what exactly happens now? The Prometheus and the Grafana, which has been installed from the UI of Messery and from the Messery CTL CLI, that installs the Prometheus and Grafana from the from the ISTO add-ons. So wherein it is a dependency on ISTO package. But if somebody wants to use any other service mesh, then they may not be able to install that because it has to be available from the ISTO add-on folder, which is been pointed in the various codes. So that is where we I just had a thought which I conveyed to Lee regarding if we can just install it from the community Helm chart, which is there. So that is why this particular issue is there. So Lee may add some more context if you'd like to.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. What took it? So people, when users run Meshery, we want to try to reduce the time to value to as little bit as possible, which is to say, as soon as they run the installation command, Meshry will actually, it'll download itself, it'll start itself, it'll open up your browser, it'll like get the user pretty far. Ideally, when the user signs in, they would like immediately be presented with helpful information about how their service mesh is running, how Kubernetes is doing, how their applications are doing. And some of that information has to do with metrics, metrics that you would get from Prometheus generally. Now, so how to make sure that Prometheus is there and Prometheus is collecting interesting information? Well, sometimes, or a lot of times, Meshry will be connected to a cluster that has an existing deployment of Prometheus. Good, well, Mesh Sync, which is a component of Meshry, it'll discover that there's an existing Grafana, existing Prometheus, retrieve information about how to connect to those and pull that into Meshry. And Meshry, attempts to, if there's just one, actually, I don't know if Meshry takes it this far, and we should. If there's just one Prometheus and one Grafana, Meshry should try to auto connect, and actually it should try to pull over some interesting stats like immediately. So that way the time to value is reduced. People are hopefully at some point delighted by the software, delighted that Meshry is, being informative, is enlightening them. Okay, well, if Prometheus or Grafana, these two metrics, the metrics collector and this visualizer of metrics, if those aren't available, okay, well, each service mesh can come with their own sort of slimmed down version of Prometheus or slimmed down version of Grafana. And good, Meshry can lets people deploy those slimmed down versions. That's helpful. You can get some metrics from them. It's good. But those slimmed down versions, one, they may not be there right away. So it may take users additional time to get to that value, to deploy those things and connect to them. Two, after they deploy them, Prometheus is capable of collecting all kinds of metrics. The slimmed down versions that come with those service meshes aren't collecting node statistics, metrics about about the Kubernetes cluster, the nodes themselves, the CPU, the memory, some of the resources on the nodes. And it's actually imperative to have those metrics when someone runs a performance test in Meshry. It's imperative that it's not just characteristics of latency and throughput of the requests that are generated and analyzing those requests. Like, it's good to analyze how long did it take for each of these requests to come back? How many requests could Meshry, the load generator, push through at one time? It can characterize the performance of a mesh in that way. That's good. But if Meshry doesn't also capture the node level resources, the number of CPU cores, number of CPU sockets, the memory, if it doesn't capture and how many nodes there are, well then, unfortunately, that makes the performance test you can't compare it to someone else's performance test, or you can't compare it across environments if you have two different environments, because you didn't capture all of the detail that was needed to really characterize and provide a frame of reference for the performance of the mesh at that time, running on 10 nodes or one node or an overloaded node, or what was the deal? So hence, I guess what I'm getting to is, for a couple of different reasons, almost guaranteeing that when you deploy Meshry, you kind of by default also get Prometheus with a node exporter. That's kind of, that's like the backstory to the issue that Samir is presenting. Now, there's a little bit of gotchas in there. It's like, well, okay, if Meshry deploys to an existing Kubernetes cluster, maybe the default behavior is to deploy an instance of Prometheus with a node exporter, so it can start collecting, and Meshry can automatically connect to it and then grab the exported metrics and then give people that like whiz bang, give them that delightful experience and capture the necessary data as someone runs a performance test. Good. That's one scenario. Well, the other scenario is, no, like this deployment has been using Prometheus for decades, for a while. Like they've got Prometheus deployed, they've got it in, maybe running under the Prometheus operator, maybe they've got running as a daemon set, they've got whatever configuration they've got. Okay, so fine, then in order of sequence, maybe mesh sync should run first, identify whether or not there is an existing Prometheus, which it does already, and it collects information about how to connect to it. That's what I had said a moment ago. So the logic here, it's not super complex logic. The logic would just be when Meshry is deployed and there isn't a Prometheus, let's go ahead and deploy a Prometheus with that node exporter, because it's just really important. Now we can give people controls over, like they don't like that. They didn't want Meshry to do that. They have a different setup and they want to do whatever. Fine, we can expose controls over, those settings for when someone installs Meshry. But by default, Meshry's opinionated deployment, I would propose to you all that it should go ahead and include Prometheus node exporter, and deploying that using Helm makes tons of sense. And deploying it with a particular configuration that is of interest to Meshry. So there's a couple of parts to that issue, I think, like, hey, what statistics are, if we do the node exporter, great. Does it need any additional subsequent configuration? Probably not, but before a node exporter is deployed, first verify that mesh sync is done with its discovery and doesn't have an existing Prometheus. Okay, great. Or maybe if it does have an existing Prometheus, but there's no node exporter, okay, then should we provision a node exporter? And so, Samir, I've just walked through a lot of things that I'm sure you already, that was already part of your thought process there.
Yeah.
Capture.
In the same line for here in connection wizard. So when I'm doing the test, I'm getting something like this. So maybe somebody.
That has been filed and fixed. I don't know if it's been released, but yeah, it's a good.
Yeah, so I was just trying to go there, and still it do not identify the service mesh.
So Mr. Dhruv Patel will reach out to you, Samir. He's been looking for, yeah.
Yes.
Yep. Dhruv, Samir has what you need. He has.
Yeah.
Okay.
I listen. Yeah. Gotcha.
Yeah. So over to the subject owner, Neha.
Yeah. So Lee and Anmin, can we note down the steps here, how to start implementing this? Because it has few sub steps. I mean, the task actually we can start, because I will need to check the code where I need to implement this part in which repository and all those things. So that would be great here to get started.
Yep. Makes sense. Yes.
I'll try to add. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, first we will try to complete the installation part using Helm chart, right? And then we can go for exposing metrics also.
There should be few conditions. So before we do that.
Yeah, but I wanted to understand from this Meshry repo, how do we start with this implementation?
Yeah, so maybe there are pros here who has direct hand behind this design. Maybe with Cos and Dhruv and Navendu, all of them may help us out. So
yeah.
Yep, sounds great. I'm going to put a link to I'll put a link that will get us going on writing a functional specification in which we can capture some of the logic that I just verbally walked through. And then we can also capture like where the best section of the code is to place this logic and yeah. And in the meantime, like, yeah, you know, doing a manual deployment of Prometheus and of the node exporter and kind of familiarizing with what metrics come back and things like, and then we can identify which ones are, you know, critical, which ones should we just by default show in the dashboard because those would be, you know, generally interesting. Like, you know, all that info can be captured in the design spec.
Yeah. Yes, that would be great, Ali.
Yeah, as it turns out, it won't be a small thing. Like in the best of ways, that's great. Like, because we'll need to expose control to users to like deprovision that Prometheus if they don't want it. We'll need to, yeah. It's good. It'll include kind of the full gamut of concerns.
Okay. Okay, so I'll wait for the updates here, Lee. I mean, we can then get started. I mean, I will also check on the Prometheus side, that Helm chart and all those things.
Sounds great. And we've got, yep, that sounds good. I'll get into that design spec. If you guys want to create a new one, you know, feel free. If you don't, I'll create one. And there is prior art in the community drive right now for, well, we will probably end up using some terms and we'll probably end up talking about static boards and dynamic boards. And so if Dhruv is listening, he might point us to a brief document on what I'm talking about. So I won't explain it now because good.
Yeah, thank you, Neha. Thank you, Samir, and thank you, Lee. The link to create a design spec is in the chat. Like you can, the directions to create a new spec is in there. All right. Moving on to the next topic, Rudraksh, would you like to talk about the recent updates in the adapters as well as mesh ECTL mesh?
Yep, I'll quickly share my screen.
Yep.
So, assuming that it's visible, we have some recent changes in mesh ECTL. So you can now deploy service meshes using mesh ECTL. Currently, I have mesh spun up. It's using the latest table, I believe, and also the latest table of OSM adapter. The mesh ECTL that I'll be using for this demo is not yet released, so this is my own compiled version. Now to deploy a service mesh, you can use the deploy command. Basically, some of the arguments that it takes is the name of the adapter, the port, and the token. Also, name of the service mesh specified as, I mean, the name should be compliant with SMP protos because that's what we aim to standardize amongst everywhere. So if I just execute this, it will deploy OSM for me. And it waits for it to get deployed. So yeah, sometimes it's a little flaky due to the event streamer, but yeah, it works. It also returns proper error code. So if the command didn't execute properly, or if we had some error in installing OSM, this would return it, ensuring that we don't mess up. Another thing that has been improved in mesh ECTL is the mesh validate command. It's basically used for performing SMI conformance tests, possibly some other specifications in future, but right now only SMI conformance tests. And both of these commands use a watch flag. So this is a thing that we should know. This watch flag right now is just to make sure that we wait for a response from the event streamer API, because we still have to build a good nesting system in here. So right now this is a little bit hacky, but reliant. I think it's reliant. So yeah, now I'll run a conformance test using MeshReCTL. And it's checking pre-reply sites, then starting, and then verifying, as in the sense if the conformance test began or not. And since I currently don't have a load balancer deployed in my system, I just lost connection to my SSH. No, okay. So yeah, I had an error while running SMI conformance tests, and that happened because I didn't have a load balancer in my system. So it returned an O1 exit code, which means that the previous command didn't execute successfully, and this would be used in the GitHub action to fail it. Like if the test didn't run successfully, this means that it failed. Like we have to stop the run. So that's why I've been a little nitpicky about exit codes in various places. So yeah, now I'll just stop the pods. Now I have a load balancer, so I'll rerun a semi-conformance test. And yeah, so it will continue waiting for it, like till it exits, and that's a long process, so I'll spare us all with that. So these are the changes in MeshReCTL. Other than this, like I used the latest OS using, and I deployed it using the Meshri adapter, a proof of which can be OS mesh list, and I'll just verify the, so yeah, this fetched the latest OSM, that is 0.9.1. And this is what the next topic is about, that is improvement in the OSM adapter to fetch the latest release rather than the hard coding of the versioning that was there earlier. So I'll just take out the PR real quick. Now we are installing using Helm charts, which is the latest release from OSM's repo, and for sidecar injection, we are not depending on OSM CLI, but rather doing it by annotating the Kubernetes namespace and labeling it appropriately. Other than that, there was some cleanup and refactoring in this, and this now ensures that OSM adapter should work fine with latest releases. And yeah, basically that's it. There is still one thing that is to be done in one of the mesh subcommands, and that is bringing in these changes to MeshReCTL mesh removed, which will remove the service mesh. So if we have it right now, it would look something like this. We have this right now, but it isn't like same as the deploy and the validate commands. It should wait for the service mesh to stop and then exit, and some of the changes have to be replicated. So if someone wants to work on this, there's a call for help. I'll open up an issue in a bit, and we can get started with this. Yeah, that's it.
Thank you, Rudraksh. So some of what Rudraksh mentioned is directly correlated to the SMI conformance GitHub action, which recently the OSM team was really intrigued by it, and they wanted to use the SMI conformance action in their development workflows. So as he mentioned, like there will be some open issues in the mesh-CTL mesh command. So if you are interested in Go, that is a good place to get started. And Rudraksh will be opening up the issues and will be sharing it in Slack, I guess. Any other comments to Rudraksh? So Rudraksh, like the changes in mesh-CTL looks really good, and we should be able to get the action ready, and I will update the docs with the new changes as well. Right, thank you, Rudraksh. The next item is from Utkarsh. Utkarsh, would you like to talk about the Minikube support?
Yep. Basically, it's a very small update. I've recently created a PR. So for the context, if anyone has tried to use Minikube with Meshri, they may have stumbled upon an issue that if you try to do so without flattening or modifying your cube config, that is basically flattening or minifying your cube config, Meshri sort of throws an error because it runs in a container and does not have access to the Minikube files to flatten that thing, the configuration. So now with this PR, you have the support out of the box. That is, you can just basically you can use Minikube and it will automatically flatten it internally. That is, in order to do so, I had to start mounting Minikube directory. So Minikube directory now gets mounted on Meshri container, not all of the adapters. It gets mounted onto Meshri container, and Meshri internally flattens the cube config and then passes on that configuration to the adapter so that adapters can actually use that one, the flattened cube config. So in this way, you don't have to basically flatten or minify your cube config manually. Meshri will take care of that. So partially, one of the update is that now you can actually flatten use Minikube out of the box without doing any further steps. The second update is actually now Meshri will be able to support multiple contexts at the same. By same time, I basically mean that we now have APIs using which you can actually switch context just like you would do in KubeCutter. So you can send a put request, not that you would be using the API, but now there are APIs which using this particular API, that is sending a put request to this certain endpoint, you would be able to switch context, and the adapters will also follow. Basically, if you send this particular request and say that, hey, I want to now use my GCP cluster, the configuration will be sent to Meshri server, and Meshri server will propagate the same information to adapters, just like it used to. Another basically endpoint that has been added is to get all of the context. We had similar endpoint for getting context, but it was from extracting. It was more about taking your cube config and extracting context out of it and sending back. Now it is more about that, hey, Meshri knows that these contexts exist, and we are letting you know that, hey, we are aware of these particular contexts. So basically, this is the short update out of the box Minikube support and ability to switch context right from Meshri. If anyone has comments on that.
Utkarsh, are there enhancements that you would suggest to follow along with this for the UI?
Yeah. So I think right now we have, I don't have Meshri running with this. Right now we have, what I just, if we actually start up Meshri, you would see that we actually even today support basically display all of the context that we are aware of. So one of the updates that we can do, and that is the reason I basically created this particular endpoint, was that now we can start showing more than one chips. And you should be able to ping all of them because now we can switch context on the fly as it is loading up. So one of the updates that I would suggest on the UI is to show more than one chips at least here. And second update would be to show context names here. So right now I have actually only one context, but what you should be able to do, because we have support for changing the context from this particular endpoint and listing all of the context from this particular endpoint, you should be able to the UI should be able to list all of the context in here. You should be able to switch it here. At the same time, we can probably, not sure about this one, but you should probably be able to have a chip here which says, for example, if I have Minikube running and kind of running, you should be able to see both of them right there. And all of that basically all of that should be achievable using these two endpoints that we have. I hope that made sense. Am I audible? Or
yep, sorry.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I'm sorry, Drew. Who's Drew?
So like you get the config from .minikube, right? For Minikube itself. Am I getting that right? So,
yeah, so
how do you prioritize between like the cube config and the Minikube config? You said by
actually,
default it will check for config, right? For Minikube.
No, so what it does is if we would actually look at my cube config, okay, it does not have any cube right now. But what would happen is that the PR is about that if the PR sees that, if the code actually sees that you have some file references in your cube config, then it will try to resolve them. I'm not sure if I'd be able to show it here, but yeah, it is here. So what it doesn't actually look specifically for Minikube. The code is a bit more generic than that. What it will do is it will find the potential candidates for flattening. So it will see that is there something that looks like a file path. If it does, then it will go ahead and try to confirm that does the file actually exist, because there can be basically it can be a false false positive also, because you can have HTTP paths there. So it just goes and try to check if there is an actual valid path on the file system, and if it does, then it will go ahead and try to resolve that thing. And by resolving it, basically means that it will read that particular file, and after reading it, it will modify your cube config. Not on disk, it will modify it in memory so that the disk cube config can stay intact, and Meshi doesn't actually overwrite it or change it in any sense, and just replaces it with basically it adds hyphen data, because that's a convention that kubeconfig has. If it's client hyphen cert, then it's actually file path reference, and if client hyphen cert hyphen data, then it's actually the embedded data. It will encode into base64 and then we'll just place that in the kubeconfig. And all of this is in memory so that the file system doesn't get affected.
Okay, so we update our local version of kubeconfig with the new configs which you have found, and we will be able to choose from them. And it won't change the local kube config which people already have for kubectl.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, that's cool. Makes sense.
Any other comments to Utkarsh? So before we move on to the next topic, since we are out of time, thank you for everyone for joining this call. And for newcomers, please fill out the community member form and you will get access to all the community resources. And we also have a newcomers meeting every Thursday, so you can join that as well. And we have meetings almost, literally every day, so you can join this as well to get oriented with the Layer5 projection. Yep. And so thank you guys. So back to Utkarsh.
Just one question. So instead of doing changes to kubeconfig, can we get those information or store that information inside .mesory config or .mesory?
No, actually, we won't change kubeconfig. Kubeconfig will change, but it will be completely in memory. The file system kubeconfig won't change, so it will stay intact. That's not untouched.
Okay, okay.
Actually, Namindu, I gave updates on both of the topics at the same time, so probably can move on.
Of course, I'm admit to not hearing everything you said, and so did you say that this implementation would allow people to, at least the back end that you're delivering, it would allow people to upload more than one kubeconfig file that might have?
No, this is more about that we have the same kubeconfig. Now it's just that we never used to persist all of the context. Now we actually keep it in memory and we can return it back. You can actually switch context. That is again something was not supported. Earlier, it was like that you can use kubectl to change the context and then delete the chip, reload the page so that we have a refreshed cluster connection. Now you can do it just using mystery.
Nice.
All right. Any other comments here?
Okay, so one question there. So let's say my memory pod dies. Does that in memory config dies or it is persistent?
Yeah, in case of actually, if it's pod, then then it's using in-cluster configuration. In that case, we are not actually dealing with kubeconfig. And if it's a container, then if it happens, actually what happens is that if we find your kubeconfig, then that's fine. And if we do not find it, we go ahead and try to read it from the disk. And at that point, we actually flatten it and store it in kubeconfig in memory. So at no point, I believe a user would actually be basically prompted that, hey, we cannot flatten this thing or something like that. It all happens the same flow.
Okay, okay, got it.
Yep, but think about this if you would. So a natural progression here might be that, well, if a remote provider so chooses to persist those cube contexts, that one, over time, as Meshri goes to inevitably support users loading multiple, loading up multiple cube configs that have any number of contexts in them, that a natural evolution is that Meshri would allow people to load up multiple config files and just, whether in memory for the local provider, track those and let people, manage through those, and then for a remote provider that does offer persistence and does have more security around user-based access to, certain users uploaded certain contexts and they have certain credentials that were provided, at that time. That, yeah, a natural progression would be for the remote providers to potentially persist and then make it convenient for users to not have to, like in the case of in Samir, one of the examples that Samir has is an AKS deployment. And Samir, do you experience any hiccups around the notion that you need to provide Meshri server a kube config? Is that something you have to manually up? Are you doing an in-cluster deployment so you get to kind of bypass the?
With reading the kube config, I don't face any issues. So it get read very frequently. But one thing to people who are using Kubernetes in cloud, so if you have multi-factor authentication on, then when you deploy it, suddenly one day you come and deploy Messery, it may not work. So you have to log in first to the cloud through the CLI. then that will work. Otherwise, it will give you Helm error.
Nice, good. I think yeah, good. Anyway, I guess my point was going to be is that like one of the Intel engineers that's working with Meshery right now is their use case, their deployment is a little bit different. So their deployment is on a remote VM. There's a Minikube instance, and then on that remote VM, remote from their laptop. So their laptop is not running the VM. There's a remote VM. They deploy Minikube. They also deploy Meshery. And in this case, they like to do it not deploying Meshery in cluster, but on Docker on that same VM.
Yes,
so
I did it at the beginning. So when I was kind of evaluating, then that needs few more security groups and few more configuration to like, connect it with your on cloud Kubernetes cluster, which was a bit tedious. So I thought, why not to move it inside the same cluster? So
yeah,
because if you create the VM and you have to create the networking between your Kubernetes cluster and VM to connect. So
yeah, exactly. Yeah, he's running into those same kind of hiccups about networking. Also, in this environment, in this scenario, when we talk about kube config and loading up kube config, is that he, as a user, may have certain kube configs on his laptop, which he might want to provide to upload to Meshery, which is, and I guess what I'm getting to is that, hey, at some point, we're going to want to let people upload multiple kube configs. And it won't always.
So if it is installed in the VM, the Meshery, then Meshery will read the VM kube config. So
right, yeah, and you're right. Like it'll, and this is in part where some of those changes are coming from. To the extent that it's a Minikube config, the certificate data isn't embedded, and so some of these enhancements will fix that. So he won't. Yeah, this will take care of him. Yeah.
Yes.
Anyways, we had a couple other items I think that people were going to demo or get feedback on.
Yep. I think Barik is on call. Barik, would you like to talk about it?
Yep, sure. But is it okay if I talk about this? Because, yeah, sure. All right. Let me share my screen. All right, can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Oh, wait. Okay, sure. All right, so what I've been doing is I've been developing some of the things that we haven't been covered on the service mesh. So in a service mesh services, there are two sections basically. So there is basically a control plane and also a data plane. So in Meshery right now, we are only showing the control plane. Yep. So what we are trying to do here is basically we're trying to add some of the features for seeing how the data plane for each of the control planes basically. So I've written a PR about it, and I think it's sort of done actually. So what I am doing is basically when you hover on one of the control plane, you can actually see what is the data planes that are consist inside of that control plane. Yep. So we can see it right now. So at Grafana control plane, there's no data plane that is running. And then if we see on the ingress gateway, so we are seeing that it's still proxy and then status ready. What is the image and what is the ports inside of that data plane? So for the actual implementation of how I did it is basically from all the containers inside the services basically. So I filter out the name. If the name of the containers includes proxy, I'll filter it and then I'll get the information for that particular container, meaning that that container is a proxy for that control planes. Yep. So that's what I've been doing. Yeah. So currently I can just show this kind of fields. And I think making it into a tooltip is a great way to know the relationship of data plane and control plane. Yep. So I think, yeah, so that's what I think. All right, any feedback? Yep, that's all.
That's good. Barak, you're retrieving that data from the local SQLite database, the MeshSync database?
Yep. Yeah, Lee, that's true.
Nice. Yeah, nice. Good. I've feedback that I'll provide separately just because it's been a long call or what have you, but I like, great. I'm excited about this. Quick question. Did you, oh, that's a lot of control plane components, which is good. Are some of those being repeated here? Or are those all? It seems like we might have Istio pilot a couple of extra times or so. And so good. Yeah, like, hey, I'll try to help dig into the queries with you to make sure that we're. Oh, I see.
I think I don't really change the queries inside the Grokhill for retrieving the control planes.
Got you. Cool. Okay. Yeah, I'll definitely dig in with you. This is nice. It's a nice idea that you know, one of the things that you're conveying is that, like, hey, there's a workload that's running. Maybe it's an application. Maybe it's a control plane component. Maybe it's a visualize. Maybe it's a Grafana or Prometheus. And each one of those, like, what you're essentially designating here with the tooltip is this workload, whatever it is, it's either on the mesh or not, because it either has a proxy adjacent to it or it doesn't. And so that's a pretty cool concept. I think there's a couple of ways to potentially visualize that. So.
Yep, that's true.
Cool. Good. Yeah, tooltips are, that's good. Nice. All right. And we had one other item is Josh still on? He might have had to go. So next week we'll catch Josh. He was going to share an update on some leaderboards on the Discuss forum. So he was going to try to write a couple of custom ones, I think, try to call out specific activities that are going on the forum. Other than that, it sounded like we took one action item away as a community, and that's to grab a time on Sunday to, like, try to identify some bugs and smash them. So the format of, like, the Sunday call would be to grab a mesh read, like, basically try to take the test plan the spreadsheet that we shared, like, run through some deployments, some vanilla deployments of, like, of Meshry, and look to see if there's any hiccups going on, identify those. You can do it haphazardly, or you can do it following it according to the test plan. So it's good. So it's a good way to get familiar with Meshry as well. Especially as we go to prepare for releasing the .6 version, we're going to need to go through and harden.
Do we have a time on Sunday when we should have the meeting?
Like, I wonder if an hour before the community call starts, if that's convenient
Yep.
for folks.
Yep, I'll send out a message and see if people are available.
Or if people want to suggest another time.
Yeah. All right. Thanks everyone for joining. Have a great weekend. Bye.
Thank you all.
Bye-bye.
Bye, folks.
Bye.